beautiful image of the dove. I think those are rose bushes. And if you guys remember the story of Jesus being baptized by, who was it, John the Baptist?
John the Baptist.
One of the ways that it was known that he was the true Son of God, or the coming of the Jesus, is that the dove landed, didn't a dove land on his shoulders? And the roses in Christianity are very important. Often associated with the Mother Mary, right? The rosary. And then what I love also is, you guys know that Latin phrase, sub rosa, but beneath the rose, which I think means the hidden nature of things, but it could also, of course, mean the unconscious, or the deeper elements of things. So, Kathy, if you would start us off, this is a sample of, this is the second chapter of the part one of the Red Book.
All right, and this is called Refinding the Soul. Can everybody hear me pretty good? You on Zoom? Okay. When I had the vision of the flood in October of the year 1913, it happened at a time that was significant for me as a man. At that time, in the 40th year of my life, I had achieved everything that I had wished for myself. I had achieved honor, power, wealth, knowledge, and every human happiness. Then my desire for the increase of these trappings ceased. The desire ebbed from me, and horror came over me. The vision of the flood seized me, and I felt the spirit of the depths, but I did not understand him. I'm skipping the footnotes if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, please do.
Yet he drove me on with unbearable inner longing. I said, "My soul, where are you? Do you hear me? I speak, I call you. Are you there? I have returned. Here I am again. I have shaken the dust of all the lands from my feet, and I have come to you. I am with you. After long years of long wandering, I have come to you again. Should I tell you everything I have seen, experienced, and drunk in? Or do you not want to hear about all the noise of life in the world? But one thing you must know, the one thing I have learned, is that one must live this life. This life is the way, the long sought after way to the unfathomable, which we call divine. There is no other way. All other ways are false paths. I found the right way. It led me to you, to my soul. I returned, tempered and purified. Do you still know me? How long the separation lasted. Everything has become so different. And how did I find you? How strange my journey was. What words should I use to tell you on what twisted paths a good star has guided me to you? Give me your hand, my almost forgotten soul. How warm the joy at seeing you again, you long disavowed soul. Life has led me back to you. Let us thank the life I have lived for all the happy and all the sad hours, for every joy, for every sadness. My soul, my journey should continue with you. I will wander with you and ascend to my solitude. The spirit of the depths forced me to say this, and at the same time to undergo it against myself, since I had not expected it then. I still labored misguidedly under the spirit of this time, and thought differently about the human soul. I thought and spoke much of the soul. I knew many learned words for her. I had judged her and turned her into a scientific object. I did not consider that my soul cannot be the object of my judgment and knowledge. Much more are my judgment and knowledge the objects of my soul. Therefore, the spirit of the depths forced me to speak to my soul, to call upon her as a living and self-existing being. I had to become aware that I had lost my soul. From this, we learn how the spirit of the depths considers the soul. He sees her as a living and self-existing being. And with this, he contradicts the spirit of this time, for whom the soul is a thing dependent on man, which lets herself be judged and arranged, and whose circumference we can grasp. I had to accept that what I had previously called my soul was not at all my soul, but a dead system. Hence, I had to speak to my soul as to something far off and unknown, which did not exist through me, but through whom I existed. He whose desire turns away from outer things reaches the place of the soul. If he does not find the soul, the horror of emptiness will overcome him, and fear will drive him with a whip, lashing time and again in a desperate endeavor and a blind desire for the hollow things of the world. He becomes a fool through his endless desire and forgets the way of his soul, never to find her again. He will run after all things and will seize hold of them, but he will not find his soul, since he would find her only in himself. Truly his soul lies in things and men, but the blind one seizes things and men, yet not his soul in things and men. He has no knowledge of his soul. How could he tell her apart from things and men? He could find his soul in desire itself, but not in the objects of desire. If he possessed his desire, and his desire did not possess him, he would lay a hand on his soul, since his desire is the image and expression of his soul. If we possess the image of a thing, we possess half the thing. The image of the world is half the world. He who possesses the world but not its image possesses only half the world, since his soul is poor and has nothing. The wealth of the soul exists in images. He who possesses the image of the world possesses half the world, even if his humanity is poor and owns nothing. But hunger makes the soul into a beast that devours the unbearable and is poisoned by it. My friends, it is wise to nourish the soul. Otherwise, you will breed dragons and devils in your heart.
Oh, my goodness.
That's intense.
Well, there you have it. I think we figured it out. Thank you for that reading. That was so Melinda asked the question, if the soul is the she, where's the corresponding he? I think that's a good question. And you suggested possibly the bottom?
Yes.
So it could be the archetype of the old rising man, which we will meet later in the very book. Fill them up. Christine just commented on the idea of longing, the longing that can't be satisfied by objects, and that the desire is apparently a reflection of the soul. Just what it is that we're longing for and wanting, wantingness that tells us we're in the soul head.
I wanted to comment, or maybe even have a question about the beginning, where he starts talking to his soul. And on the second page, he says, all other way, I have found the right way, and it's led me to you, my soul. And it seems to follow from what he said in the beginning, where he's reached the middle of life, he's accomplished everything he wanted to do, and now it's time to reach the soul. And so my question is this his belief that this is the only way to reach the soul, which is to accomplish everything you want to do in the world and then put it aside and go explore the soul?
It's a good question. Your hand is up.
As you said, I heard that was one of his experience up until then, but maybe not necessarily a prerequisite condition for turning from the soul. Maybe that longing can erupt before we accomplish everything that we want on the worldly level. But that unbearable inner longing can make itself felt before we to fulfill the
So we're having a discussion about this. Essentially, of course, what we now have come to call the midlife crisis. And Kathy, with the help of you, I mean, he gave us that idea. But Kathy was saying, well, is it necessary? And I'm sorry, your first name?
I'm Deborah.
Okay, and Deborah was saying, well, maybe Jung is describing his experience, but he's not saying that it is inevitable. Perhaps there is another way if one thought differently or went through life differently. Maybe it's not necessary. Modern thinkers tend to agree with you. The midlife is not necessary, the midlife crisis.
He does say, one thing I have learned is that one must live this life. That seems to be general. Whether, you have the same kind of accomplishments and satisfaction as he had, I don't think that's general. That you have to live this life.
He's also a man of wealth, and he had all these, he saw privilege.
Absolutely.
And that message, I guess you then was really bad and stop this. You're living the best life.
Yeah, we're talking about, Melinda commented that Jung was clearly a man of privilege. I mean, he was not only recognized professionally and earned money, but his wife was very, very wealthy. There was absolutely no need for him to work at all in the first place. And so, even more profound, that he would say, yes, but even this is not it. It's not enough. It's not doing something for my soul.
Makes me think of the title of the man's search for meaning, that the meaning doesn't probably come from the emerged status of wealth and comfort.
Yeah.
And that necessity for meaning emerges in this longing.
So we've had two references in our discussion. One is referencing Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and describing that the work of the soul is really the work of meaning. And that's certainly supported in The Spirit of the Depths, is primarily concerned with meaning. Somebody else mentioned Nietzsche, and it is impossible to read the Red Book without thinking of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, this project of becoming one's, well, you would say becoming truly individuated, but becoming truly oneself.
I think that's Campbell Plains, what it was Campbell. People say we're meaning that actually we're looking for the experience of being alive. That's which I think is kind of also is you're going to get to that by actually being alive, which is different than trying to fit into some local.
Yes. We just had a comment about Joseph Campbell was mentioned, and Joseph Campbell, believing that meaning itself is not a major project, but it is lived experience. And that if we're lucky, it would lead to meaning, but lived experience being important to Joseph Campbell. And it sounds an awful lot like what Jung just said about
One must live this life.
one must engage, one must be, one must live.
It seems like some of this is about, that when you focus on the experience of desire, rather than what you're projecting onto the object. There's always like a fine line, because we can withdraw projections, like where things become meaningless, that you're no longer engaging with what you
Interesting. So one of the things we're also discussing here is the withdrawal from projections. And then the sort of precarious position that we're in when we withdraw projections, when we don't want to withdraw them too much and slip into absolute nonsense or meaninglessness. And meaninglessness and that dilemma will come up a lot of them. Yeah.
Would that relate to what he says later, that it's only half the world? If we possess the image of a thing, we possess half the thing. He's saying we need to have both. The world and I would assume the image of the world is a projection. So it's an illusion, but we still need it.
So one of the things, Christine, she reread a line from the text in address to Kathy's question, and she read, "I had to accept that which I had previously thought my soul was not at all my soul, but a dead system." And so Christine was referencing that in view of this question of, is the image is only half of the thing? Perhaps that's a part of the half, is just the mere well, something that I thought was my soul, but was really not at all anything more than just dead and alive. I would add that in terms of the image, Jung develops that idea of the image and claims that the commitment that he made in this project and in his work is that all images that came to him from the unconscious in his active imagination experiences would be treated like any patient that he had. So any image he would look at and see what its persona is, what its shadow is, does it have any sense of transcendence? Does it have a masculine or feminine aspect? I'm trying to think of all the, all the things that Jung would apply to his patients, he claimed could be applied to any image that emerges from him.
I very much would. That's really good, Mr. Stalker. You have anything that came up, you put that in the chair and you talk to it. It's a lot, it's a living, it becomes a part of it.
Absolutely. One of our visitors here talked about Gestalt therapy and the idea of doing empty chair work and having dialogue. And again, this red book is that very Gestalt work. He's having dialogue with part of himself.
I was very, very struck and interested by Charles, your comment about treating every image as if it was a patient. And again, I'm always looking for the source material of that. So do you have a source for that, a reference?
I don't want to sound like a one-trick pony, but this is from the introduction to the Red Book by Sanu Shamdasani. And I'd have to tell you where it is in that introduction. I don't know right off the top of my head.
So maybe when you move into the email that gives the resources, maybe you could list a page. That would be just so awesome. Thank you, Charles. You're doing a great job.
Other comments or observations?
I'm trying to understand this whole last part about the image. The image of the world is half the world. So what's the other half in that?
So we have another question on the floor. You know, not only do we have, there's the soul is feminine, and the question was, well, what is the masculine complement? But now we have another question, and that is, if the image is only half of the world, what is the other half? I think that's a great question.
The image being.
Yeah, the image could mean that little Swiss town that we saw in the picture. It could be the physical worldliness. But it doesn't have to be. It could be anything, I suppose.
I'm just thinking there's the inner life.
Okay, so one possible answer to the question, if the image is half of the world, what is the other half? One of the suggestions has been, it could be
Internal versus external.
the inner life could be that topic.
Can I read the footnote that there is a footnote
For number 44.
42.
Okay.
In psychological types, Jung articulated this primacy of the image through his notion of essay. In her diary notes, Carrie Baines commented on this passage. What struck me especially was that what you said about the build image being half the world. That is the thing that makes humanity so dull. They have missed understanding that thing. The world, that is the thing that holds them wrapped. But das Bild, or the image, they have never seriously considered unless they have been poets.
That's for the terms.
But he says there at the bottom of this page, the image of the world is half the world. He possesses the world, but not its image only possesses half of the world. So he's saying in that, the world is half of it and the image is half of it.
Yeah, it sounds like he's making a distinction between the material and then our ability to apprehend.
Representation and relationship.
Yes. What, say that again?
The images and the lighting and all that is
Oh, fascinating. Miriam just pointed out that, if we talk about this thing about the image versus the material, the Red Book itself is a process of apprehending an image and then reimagining the image and then reshaping the image. And therefore, there's this sense of power and transformation that comes from continuing to be open to shaping and giving birth to new images. Fascinating.
he took it away from me.
Yeah, I'm just trying to amplify. Yeah, that's nice. Helen, your hand is up.
I'm wondering if what you just were talking about is the archetypes. I mean, that it's a symbol, but it's so much more. It's all the association, and it's also in process of becoming something else. So that's kind of what archetype is.
It's living. It's engaging. It's actually working.
Also, if you don't humanize the archetype, you don't humanize the warrior archetype takes over you and you become a killer.
Oh, interesting. So folks, now we're talking about, Helen introduced this idea that the image, that realm of being in consciousness belongs to the archetypes. And so it's not the material part of the world, but now we're talking about the imaginal archetypal world. And somebody mentioned that those archetypes have a life of their own. And then somebody else mentioned, I think correctly, that there are archetypes, if we don't interact with them, in relationship with them, they start to act us out. Or in psychology, we say, acting out. It's the same thing. Yeah, in the archetype that was mentioned specifically was the warrior archetype. So we're either going to cooperate with it in a healthy way, or it's going to work on us in an unhealthy way. Yeah. One thing that I would like to add, just because I mentioned it earlier, this is an example of being able to cite some material. If you look at footnote 44, for people that are in the room, this is a fine example of a person who was creating or working with a draft that was in the Black Book. And this is, again, is Carrie Bain. And I think she was a patient of Jung's. I'm not exactly sure. But this is an example of the kind of feedback that he would get looking at various passages of reading Jung. So on February the 8th, 1924, she writes, she's writing to Jung directly, "I came to your conversation with your soul." This is what we just read. All that you say is said in the right way and is sincere. It is no cry of the young man awakening his life, but that of the mature man who has lived fully and richly in ways of the world, and yet knows almost abruptly one night say that he has missed the essence. The vision came at the height of your power, and you could have gone on just as you were with perfect worldly success. I do not know how you were strong enough to give it heed. I am really for everything you say and understanding. Everyone who has lost the connection with his soul or has known how to give it life ought to have a chance to see this book. Every word so far lives for me and strengthens me just where I feel weak. But as you say, the world is very far away from it. This is a fine example of these manuscripts being passed around and then you getting feedback and comments. And I did fail to mention that almost all of his colleagues were always trying to get published this. He put a stipulation in his will or in his estate that it would have to be 50 to 80 years before the Red Book could be published. And that's why it was, well, eventually published in 2009. But his biggest opposition, I believe, though, we could discuss other possibilities, but I think his biggest opposition was he didn't think this would further the cause of analytic psychology. And especially in the 1920s, Freud was still at the height of his power and influence, and he really just believed this would be a nightmare. It would be too much. The people could not untangle this. They couldn't appreciate all of the things that he was doing. All the different registers that he was using would only just confuse. I mean, it makes for fantastic discussion now. But if we were in a classroom trying to learn how to be an analyst, the Red Book would not help the novice analyst, I don't think, the way usually textbooks do, if you know what I'm saying. So I believe that's a part of why he wanted to. Not scientific at all.
About this similar to Newton, chemical writings that could be published.
Oh, interesting. One of the commentators mentioned that Newton also had alchemical writings that he wanted to not have published during his lifetime. Yeah, interesting. For fear of what being ridiculed or
that it would take away from the scientific aspect.
It's actually quite amazing. But for industry, but
Put it to the
So the very last thing that we were talking about is how many scientists apparently have dabbled in to spirituality, spiritualism, things that are other than scientific and that they love what their name attached to it.
And Young Family also was really heavy publishing.
Yeah, do you know what the resistance was?
That, I think it was that discredit his place in the world.
Yeah. Okay, just
So-
credit his standing as a man of science,
Yes.
a valid practitioner. Well, folks, we're right at the end of time. It is 11:29. We have actually 1 second left. Let's just use our 1 second any way that we like. But listen, I really enjoyed this process today. I do want you all on Zoom to know we recognize some limits before we will address. I think we have found the right place in terms of a room we could use. We'll just get a little bit of additional technology, and I think it'll really help you folks out in Zoom land. We have 3 more of these trainings planned. The next one is on the 27th of this month. It should be exactly 2 weeks away. And then we have 2 that are planned in February, February 10th and February 24th. I do want you to know that since the Red Book is divided into 3 sections, the first one being the longest, next time we're going to come back to section 1. And then in February, we're going to look at section 2, which is called essentially book 2. And then the last meeting that we're going to have at the end of February, we'll be looking at the scrutinies, which is the 3rd part of the Red Book. So I just want to give a sampling, very much like I did today. And look, this is a scratch of the surface, but the idea is that we will all be a little bit more informed and able to get into the writing and really appreciate the complexity and where it comes from. Because it's made differently than anything else we've ever written.